Good morning. Today we're going to look at Luke 22, verses 1 through 34. Um, I looked ahead tomorrow and Sunday we would finish the book of, or this chapter of 22. So we'll do 34 verses today, and then tomorrow we'll do 35 through 71, and then we'll be on course again on Monday when we get back into the um, daily reading of the New Testaments. Um, Chapter 22 begins with the festival of unleavened bread. And then he says, called the Passover was near. And the Israelites, it was the festival of unleavened bread. As you're back in Exodus, and you can read it in Deuteronomy as well, that, that God told the Israelites for 7 days, you will, have no leaven in your house. You will eat the unleavened bread. And then they would celebrate the Passover. They would slaughter the Passover lamb, and then they would have the Passover meal. But the festival, the 7-day festival, was the festival of unleavened bread, and this is we know that this Passover, this festival of unleavened bread, is the third one that Jesus has in Jerusalem with his disciples. And verse 2 says, the chief priests and scribes were looking for a way to put Jesus to death, for they were afraid of the people. They weren't so much afraid of Jesus, but they were. But they were afraid of the people. They were afraid of the people trying to raise Jesus up as king and starting a revolt against the Romans. And they knew that wouldn't come off very well, because, they were pretty much defenseless, in so many different ways. But regardless, that's it. And then verse 3, Satan enters into Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12, and says that he went away with the chief priests and discussed with them, how he may betray Jesus to them. And of course, the chief priests were excited. They were greatly pleased, and this is going to work. You could just almost hear their excitement of one of the 12 going to betray Jesus, and I mean, but the reality is that Jesus was there, playing his day every day in the temple. I mean, they could arrest him any time. They didn't need Judas to betray him. I mean, this was totally a ridiculous thing in so many ways, but it works out. It comes out. We know how it comes out, that Judas betrays Jesus in the garden in the dark, where, maybe it would have been easier for them to arrest the wrong person. But anyway, then verse 7, then came the day of unleavened bread, in which the Passover lamb would be sacrificed. And Jesus sends his disciples ahead. He says, follow a man carrying a jar of water. And this, even a man who is a slave wouldn't normally be carrying water. That was women's work. I mean, I don't like saying that, but that's what it was. And so the disciples didn't have to, you wonder, well, which man? Because, it was pretty easy, because it would be only one that would be doing that. And they followed him as Jesus instructed to this house. And the owner of the house had this upper room. And the upper room comes into a lot of play during the time of this Passover and Easter and the resurrection and Jesus' appearances to the disciples. This upper room that is in a house we don't know about, is owned by a person who we don't know. We just assume that, maybe Jesus had talked with them ahead and had things arranged, but because when the disciples got there, the upper room was there and furnished and ready for Jesus and the disciples. And so they go to have the Passover meal. And while, verse 14 says, when the hour came, Jesus took his place at the table and the apostles with him. And he says, I have eagerly desired to have this Passover meal with you. For I tell you, I will not eat it again until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of heaven. And then this is a little bit confusing in some ways, because it says he took a cup. And giving thanks, he said, take this and divide it, for I tell you, I will not drink of this again. I mean, we do the bread first and then the cup, right? Yeah, well, Jesus does that, because then he takes a loaf of bread, breaks it, gives thanks to them, says, this is my body. And then he did the same with the cup. Well, during the Passover meal, Seder meal, there's 4 times that we drink out of the cup. And so this time, the first time here is most likely the third time during the Seder meal that you would drink. And then the bread is served, and then this last cup of wine that Jesus has in our words of institution would most likely be the 4th time of the drinking of the cup during the actual Seder meal. And, Matthew's gospel is the only one that says for the forgiveness of sins, But, Jesus says, the cup that is poured out for you is a new covenant in my blood. And then it's, see, the one who betrays me is at hand. And again, for the Son of Man is going as it has been determined. And then they all began to ask, well, who is it? Is it me? Is it me? Is it me? And, that would be a horrible feeling to have Jesus say to us, one of you will betray me. Well, the reality is that each and every one of us betrays Jesus. But then after that, again, the disciples are, what's going on? And in Luke's telling now, it's the disciples have a dispute about who is going to be the greatest. And Jesus reminds them that, excuse me, he reminds them that it's kings of the Gentiles that lord it over people and find places of honor and of greatness. But again, here it's, for I did not come to be served, but I came to serve. And then it's also that's what we should do. We should be more interested in being able to be helpful and servants of others than to have all of these people waiting on us and making us feel so good about everything. In verse 27, Jesus says, who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one at the table? Well, yeah, okay, that's Jesus is saying. It is. But I am among you as the one who serves. So even though Jesus is at the head of the table, even though Jesus is the Son of God, even though Jesus is the most powerful person to ever have lived upon the face of the earth, he says, I came to serve, not to be served. And he talks to him a little bit more and tells him, thanks him for standing beside him in the trials. And he says, just as my Father has conferred on me a kingdom so that you may eat and drink at my table, my kingdom, and you will sit on the thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So the disciples will have a place in this kingdom of heaven, but, it is to be determined that way. And the last thing we're going to look at today, these next 4 verses, 31 to 34, Jesus is speaking pretty much specifically to Simon Peter. He says, Simon Peter, listen, Satan has demanded to sift all of you like wheat, but I have prayed for you, that your own faith may not fail. And when you once have turned your back, you will strengthen your brothers. And Peter says, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to the point of death. And Jesus says, Peter, I tell you, on this night you will betray me 3 times. You will deny me 3 times. And so Jesus, this is the important thing here to look at, is that Jesus tells Peter, he says, Simon, Peter, listen, I have prayed for you. Satan wants to sift you all. Satan wants to have you. But I have prayed for you that you will have strength, that your faith will not fail, and that you will be able to strengthen your brothers. And think about that. In the Gospel of John, there's the high priestly prayer where Jesus prays for himself, he prays for the disciples, and then he prays for the people. And not just the people of that day, but the people today as well. So Jesus, prays for us. Martin Luther says the Holy Spirit intercedes for us with, I know Paul wrote that the Holy Spirit intercedes for us with sighs too deep for words to express. And Martin Luther says the Holy Spirit calls, gathers, enlightens, and strengthens us in one true faith. And so Jesus prays for the disciples. He prays for you and me as well.